My interest and role is observing the sea level change, observing the ocean warming, which is the amount of heat entering the ocean. And the ocean's really central to the climate system. It's the only place which heat is stored. Essentially 90% of the heat from climate change is in the ocean. And the other 10% is in the atmosphere, in melting ice, in the land, etc. And I've also ended up in a position where I'm synthesizing many different components of sea level rise. So we would look at work done by oceanographers on sea level rise, observations of sea level rise, work done by geologists, working out how sea level has changed in the past from records in sediments. We'd be looking at work from glaciologists about how ice sheets change and how they have changed in the past. Work by atmospheric scientists about how the atmosphere is changing, how greenhouse gases are changing, so chemists and physicists. And work from people building global climate models and what are those implications. So it is drawing many different disciplines together to come to an overall synthesis. I guess I'm most known for our record of how sea level has changed during the 20th century. We did that by combining the information from satellite altimeters, which is a complete global coverage, but it's only a very short record from 93 to the present, with coastal sea level measurements, which are much longer, going back into the 19th century, but they're only at a few isolated spots around the globe. So we actually worked out how you could combine these two sets of measurements to come to estimates of global average sea level rise and its regional distribution. And that's what we're still most known for. And it's really pleasing to see those results being used by many different people around the world. We discovered the impact of volcanoes on the ocean. So I developed this record of sea level rise, and I was trying to understand the variability in it. And almost by accident, I noticed this appeared to be a relationship to violent volcanic eruptions. Now, I'd never thought of volcanoes and the ocean. What's the relationship here? Well, the relationship is very simple, actually, and it's well known in the climate system. Violent volcanic eruptions, like Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines in 1991, ejects a huge amount of aerosols into the stratosphere. And they reflect the solar radiation, and there's less solar radiation reaching the Earth and reaching the ocean, and therefore the ocean cools. And in fact, the ocean then cools the atmosphere through changing the evaporation. To be a good scientist, to have an impact and discover new things, as distinct from tinkering at the edges, then you really need insight. You really need some imagination about what could happen, what could be the situation. My father was a country GP. I grew up in a country town and went to a country high school. He was interested in physics and why things worked too. School or education didn't, at least in those days, always encourage originality in thought. And people were sort of beaten into the common mold, but I didn't have to be. And so today the science is continuing to move rapidly. And an example actually is in the work of sea level rise in understanding the ice sheets. It's moving incredibly quickly because there's this very strong demand. We need to understand how the ice sheets are going to impact future sea level. And there's huge numbers of papers coming out on this every week. It's very hard to keep up with it. I do think climate change is a really serious issue that we are not adequately grappling with. But on the other hand, there are many things that we can do to improve that future. I think we can meet the challenge of reducing our emissions and living in a more sustainable way, as long as we choose to do that. And the challenge is to actually encourage people to do that.